Ooh, I hope y'all are ready. I'm getting my costume on. Right? I got my beads. Got some beads on. I'm dressed up as a mystic. Look at this. You ready for this? See if it'll do it. You can't really tell, but it glows in the dark. I made it. What's up, fam? What are y'all doing? What's up? What's up? Let me see who's in the room. I guess I got the wrong kind of music on for Halloween, but I gotta have something that's popping. Something that's getting us moving. My intro music. This is better. What you think? Does that sound a little more Halloweenish? What's up? Hey, brother. We got Chris in the room. I guess we got everybody from all over. Miss Deidre, Washington, D.C., I believe. I like it. I like it. Yes, yes. Mother White. Yes. Oh! Ruben is in the building. I want everybody right now to make sure you give a shout out to Ruben, who has been going through a few procedures, and I know he is recovering. We're glad to see you in the room. We're so glad to see you, room. Be inspired by this music. Well, guys, we're going to get this rocking and rolling. Hey, you know what to do. When you see people in the room, you see some new people, just log in. And you know what? I got Tia. Tia is really wonderful, doing all kinds of different things to help with expanded consciousness, going beyond belief. Hi, Holly. That's so cool to have you. Thank you so much for logging in, Miss Holly and Rose. Some of these people all of you guys are just really special to me, right? I will tell you, you're very special. We're going to have some fun. Gonna have so much fun this evening. I want you guys, hey, listen, make sure you keep your questions and put questions in there, because you're gonna have some questions. And when Dorothy Parker logs in, because it looks like she's late, because she has no choice, she can't forget. I'm looking for Dorothy Parker, and I'm also looking for Miss LaDonna. Some people have requirements, like Tia. All right, guys. That's awesome. And our guest here is, it's going to be amazing. I can't even tell you, I think I found him because I thought I was really interested in mysticism already. It was calling me. And I know that a lot of people, we talk about things like deconstructing, and I had a long conversation with Miss Dorothy today about various different things about the community and where we're going, what we're building, what we're doing. And it was beautiful. But I found Carl, honestly, going through Amazon. And I was like, I got to get in touch with this guy. This was months ago because this is really cool to find someone with such knowledge and depth, allowing us to really just raise consciousness because ultimately, that's what we need to do. We have to raise the consciousness, especially in this moment of the world when you have in our country a major election that's taking place. Whether you like one party or the other, we still need to raise the consciousness. We still need to have a deeper awareness. We still need to understand that we as people need to learn to go within, and we need to learn our power and so on and so forth. Let's get on with it. Malachi, it's not your time. It is our time. Everybody ready? Hey, make sure you like, of course, comment if you're in the room, and share if you like. You might get in trouble from some of your other friends that see what we're talking about. You like that? I told Carl I'd done something a little extra. Set up a production camera. He thought I was talking about this camera. Actually, it's an older one, but this one's probably $5,000. Oh, anyways, let's get on with this show. I think you guys will really enjoy it. And one of the things is I'm not sure if we'll just go to the website. I want to get this part out of the way. And and we may find out more. But I put a link on my Facebook page, and you will be able to find his books on Amazon. We'll probably look at them before this night's over. And I even believe that some of those books are available on Audible, right? So make sure that, we're going to be talking about this. I want you to see it right here. Hey, I'm appearing over his eyes. Like, look at that. Celtic wisdom, the mystical path to a joyful life, right? That right there, you could see his name is labeled under there. This is, man, I'm just doing this because this is really special. Read the Bible like a mystic. This is one I advise people to get right here. I'm show that. Look at, oh my God, let's get on with the show. Woo! Man, I hope y'all ready. Because we're going to be conjuring up something here. Oh boy. Woo! I got him on. What's up, brother?
Hello there. So good to be here. I just love your energy so much, and the vibe from the community. Man, is this just great?
It's fun. We call it a lot of it derives the expanded conscious community. A lot of this derives from Bishop Carlton Pearson, which I was his co-host and did some consulting, coaching with him on some of this digital stuff. And so, here we are, and he transitioned, and then there was a little bit of separation. They took on the Bishop D. Polk, another guy, took on the legacy, which is beautiful to me, because I want to do some weird shit. And say that too.
I love it.
So, one of the things, I think one of the first questions I really have for you, is I guess you can kind of give a glimpse of, who you are to the audience, in terms of like you are a prolific writer. You're tapping in or tuning in to something. you, you got before casting a spell. When someone you love is Wiccan, like, oh my God, that's so funny. You know, you got some books, Soul Food. I mean, it just goes on and on. But essentially, a lot of the people that's in this community, we all have some ties to Christianity and charismatic and Pentecostalism and some evangelical, some Mormon. I mean, we have a deep tie. Um, some of us ran from the church. Some of us, like, you know, got completely away. Some people may still go, like, here and there, and which is cool.
Yeah.
But how did you open this up? How did you arrive to? I mean, because your Christian mysticism book would have to be like, you get a lot of reviews on it, and a lot of people look like they're interested in it. Was that one of your first places that you went to, in terms of coming at? Well, let's just start there.
Yeah.
What was your original church like
Okay.
that you
Yeah.
started with?
Let me just kind of tell the beginning of the story, the backstory, and then we'll just see where it takes us.
Yeah.
So I am, a child. My dad was a pilot during World War II. So I'm a young boomer. I was born in 1960. Grew up in Virginia. My dad was stationed at Langley Air Force Base. My mom and dad were members of the Lutheran Church. So that was the church I grew up in, kind of a mainline Protestant kind of a gig. And I think, like many people, church was, just part of life. I think the term here is cultural Christian. So it wasn't anything that really necessarily had, grabbed my heart, but it was just part of the fabric. And I think I believed in God. I believed in some sort of spirit, but it wasn't inner transformational. And I don't know how or why this happened and why it happened to me. And it just shows, maybe the spirit has a sense of humor as much as anything else. But I was 16 years old, so I'm in high school. Like I said, Lutherans, and in Virginia, the statewide Lutheran Church did a weekend conference for high school kids every February. So I went to this conference. Total honesty, I was more there interested in flirting with the girls than I was talking to God. But over the weekend, it's like my heart kind of opened up to the presence of the Spirit. And then that evening, so Saturday, it was a weekend, so Friday through Sunday. Saturday night, we had a communion service. And it was a bunch of kids. So it was very much kind of just kind of a sweet vibe, a kind of, they'll know we are Christians by our love, kumbaya kind of a vibe. This is in the 1970s. And we're doing communion. So we're passing bread and wine around amongst all the people. Each person is giving the communion to the person next to them. It's just a really, really sweet energy. And in the middle of this, and it's hard for me even to put it into words, but in the middle of this, it was as if the room became filled with light. Suddenly there was light everywhere. And I never experienced anything like that. And not only was there light, but there was love. And suddenly I was full of love, and I felt in love, and all the people around me, just this sweet love energy was flowing. And it was like I lost all sense of time. Did that last 2 seconds, or did that last 20 minutes or 20 years? I don't know. It felt like I popped out of time and popped into eternity. And of course, it eventually passed, and eventually it's like the light just went back to normal, and the love just kind of became this kind of sweet afterglow. And then the communion service was over, and so they were going to set up a stereo and have like a dance. So it was a bunch of kids. We were going to have a little dance. And I saw some friends of mine and I said, wasn't that the most amazing thing ever? And they looked at me and they said, it was nice. It was nice. Let's go grab a Coke. And that was when I realized almost kind of with a shiver that whatever had happened to me was a gift for me. I honestly thought it was something objectively miraculous that had happened. And then it was like, oh, that was some sort of interior thing. Of course, I had no language. I was 16 years old. I had no language for this. So I went back to my room. I didn't even go to the dance. I went back to my room by myself and I just sat in the silence and I just tried to make sense. What just happened to me? What was going on there? Now, I've talked to a lot of people over the years, and I've had people tell me that a lot of teenagers will have these kinds of, heart, soul opening moments. So I don't think it was that extraordinary, but it wasn't on the map. Nobody at church, nobody in my family, nobody in my life had ever said, oh, by the way, at any moment you could have a spontaneous mystical awakening. That just was never given to me. And then there it was. And so, we can go a lot of detail, but let's just say that my life changed forever that night. And, and then people were recommending books to me. And I read this book by this woman from England called Evelyn Underhill, and she introduced me this idea of mysticism. And when I read that book, I was like, that's what I just experienced. And, I thought, whatever that is, I want it. And basically, I've given my life to it,
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's a little different in the sense that a lot of people can have experiences of a lot of pain, especially from church,
Yeah.
or different situations that they go through. But I think it's beautiful also. Um,
And let me be real. I've had the pain too. And certainly, the judgment and the legalism and all the isms, the racism, the
yeah.
sexism, the homophobia, all that stuff. And we're evangelical, we don't like Catholics. We're Catholics, we don't like evangelicals. All of that stuff has been in the mix. So I don't want to give the impression that I've just had this cozy, sweet little love vibe with church. But I think what I have been given and what I think is available to all of us is that love vibe with spirit.
Mm.
And so, and for some people, that means, being part of that church community, warts and all. And for other people, that means get as far away from that as you possibly can. There's no one size fits all when you're talking about mystical spirituality. It really is very much, what is your DNA? What do your fingerprints look like? And then, and that's how we have to discern how spirit is calling us. So.
Well, I think too, also you were allowed and someone was giving you a book, to explore. And I'm not, of course, when you look at the different denominations and how they function, especially, you have, I think you said Lutheran, but as the Christianity began to, as it began to morph and change very into kind of modern, systems, I really look at the capitalistic business, and when I think evangelical and I think charismatic, and I think even we will call it gospel Hollywood, where Carlton was. And, that was like the birth of it. I went to Oral Roberts. And so that's like gospel Hollywood University.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't you think it's like a double-edged sword though? Because
I wonder, I enjoyed some of my professors.
Yeah, I'm sure you made some beautiful connections there. And I think even the media thing, you and I, this is media right here. And here we are connecting with people, certainly all over the United States, probably all over the world.
It's all,
And
yeah.
that is so beautiful. Absolutely. It's so beautiful. And it just fills my heart with wonder that we can make these kinds of connections. And just listening to you at the beginning and realizing what a community is here, what a family is here. Number of people in the chat are like, hey, family, and I feel like I've been invited to a lovely dinner, with this amazing family. And so media, technology, all that, they're not the enemy.
No.
But you mentioned capitalism, and the reality is that there are systems of power and privilege in our culture that can take these tools and twist them.
Yes.
And we have to be always on the guard. And just because you're in a church or you're in a spiritual organization doesn't make you exempt.
No.
That kind of distortion can happen at any time. So it is something we have to be mindful of.
I think the thing is as we become mystics, and that's where I really want to spend a lot of time in terms of most people, like in history, like you were introduced to it at a young age, which is beautiful to me, which allows for you to explore and ask questions and wonder and even explore the early church from, what we have with King James, who I refer to as King Jamie sometimes. What we have, I love to intertwine the historical facts that we never knew, right? Unless you really get a little deep. And lately, my study has been really getting deep into what happened and what was going on in terms of that 1611 and moving up, and you got Rosicrucia, and you got so many different things when all of a sudden we came up with this King James Bible. But there was a lot that was already on the planet. There was a lot that we have been through, and I think a lot that we have discovered. It seems like it could have been mixed a little bit more with the Eastern kind of philosophy versus it just in Western philosophy. And so, what is a mystic?
Well, and let me just say one more thing. And speaking as somebody, obviously, Caucasian, white American, when I was introduced to mysticism, it was very much kind of like, well, this is a European thing. But mysticism has its roots in Egypt.
Yeah.
And all the early Christian mystics come from that Mediterranean crescent. Your Origen, who is from Alexandria, Clement, who is from Alexandria, the desert mothers and fathers, Moses the Black. I mean, the roots of this tradition are African.
Yes.
And it's something that it breaks my heart that is not more widely acknowledged. And so I just have to say,
tonight we're doing it, and I'm one of them.
Yeah. So well, here you are. Yeah. And so so it is so important, not only to dive into the history, but also to learn to read the history without some of the filters that have been put in the centuries, the intervening centuries.
Ooh, this is good.
What is a mystic? What is a mystic? So, well, okay, the word, let's just start with the word. It comes from the Greek. It's the same word that we get mystery from, but also that we get mute from. So think of the mute button on your phone, or on Zoom, how many times have we said, oh, Carl, you're muted, that's the same root word. And then mystery. And I always like to say, it's not Nancy Drew mystery. It's more deep spiritual esoteric mystery. It's, Nancy Drew mystery is a puzzle, and with the right clues, you solve the puzzle. And hey, that's cool. But mystical mystery, there's no solving it. There's just going deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And what I think mute reminds us is that it takes us to a place beyond words. It takes us to a place beyond language. It takes us to a place of deep interior and exterior, but interior silence. The interior silence is what matters the most. And it's because you're moving into a language that can't be put into words. The language of the heart, language of the gut, language of your root chakra. And that we can only listen to through the ears of silence. And so the So who is a mystic? What is a mystic? First of all, and this is one of the most important things that I can say, a mystic is not a special kind of person. Each person is a special kind of mystic. Let me say that. And that's not original with me. I've gotten that from several different monks over the years. I don't know who said it first, but a mystic is not a special kind of person. Each person is a special kind of mystic. So this isn't about, oh, Carl, you had that experience when you were 16 years old. You must be a mystic. Well, if you're going to call me a mystic, be prepared to call yourself a mystic too. Because that, I think, being a mystic is like being human. It is our common birthright. It is knit into our DNA. And so, so it's like every one of us has a heart that has the capacity to be calibrated toward divine love. Every one of us has a heart that is designed to be a chalice into which the nectar of the wine of the sacred is poured. As one friend of mine once said, God is not elsewhere. And another person I heard once say, God and I are not two. God and I are not two. And so that's, again, not just me, that's us. God and us are not two. And so the mystical tradition, if we're going to talk history, we're talking a tradition, the mystical tradition is this invitation into this lineage of men, women, people, generation after generation, every culture all around the world. It's not just a Christian thing. It's not just a Western thing. It is a human thing, again, that of people who either spontaneously or through study or through practice or through meditation, variety of different ways, have calibrated their heart towards that reality and then are able to give it away, and to give it away through art, through music, through dance, through poetry, through psychic work, through meditation, through mentoring, through love, through service, through action, through deep contemplation, all of the above. Again, there's so many different ways. Each person is a special kind of mystic. The way I tune into the divine is not going to look the same way as you tune into the divine. And that's the beauty of this. It's not cookie cutter. You know, I can't just give you a formula. The formula is there is no formula. The formula is your heart is the formula. Your gut is the formula. You have the antenna already built inside you. And so the question is, how do I learn to listen to that? How do I learn to access that deep interior wisdom? And again, back to mystery and mute, the key is so often it's silence. Silence that we access through meditation, through deep listening, through, you know, just being present to our bodies, being present to nature, being present to the stars and the sun and the sky. I mean, I can go on and on, but I hope that
No, that's great.
a little,
I
you
love
know,
it when a
introduction.
person gets to go on and on, because we love, as a community, we're very conscious and we love to learn and grow. And you have so much experience
Hmm.
at this. And so, you know, it took a lot to me whenever I look at, you know, it's just, if we just start at, you know, you had the big book, I believe, of Christian mysticism. And then
Mhm.
you like recently released another expanded version of it.
Right. Mhm.
And so, like, what led to that? You know, because that's a lot of cataloging and a lot of building. And also, did you address any of the Egyptian or the African? You know, I'm listening to it on Audible, but
Mhm. Yeah, not as much as I probably should, but I do try to acknowledge that. And one of the goals in that book, so the first edition came out in 2010, and the second edition came out last year. So it was about, you know, 13-year difference in there. And so, yeah, one of the things that I tried to do was to make the book more inclusive of all cultures, all traditions, all lineages, you know, so foregrounding, and it is a Christian book, so it's focused on the Christian tradition, but, you know, foregrounding voices like Howard Thurman or Desmond Tutu or Pauline Murray, you know, a bit more, again, to me, I'm just going to be very, very candid, to make the book less white and less Eurocentric in that. So that was one of the intentions of the book. Another one of the intentions of the book was to acknowledge the Jewish tradition, that Christian mysticism has roots. I mentioned, okay, we've talked about the African roots, we've talked about the Greek roots. Well, the third leg in that tripod would be the Jewish roots. And in the first edition, I don't think I gave that enough love either. So those were just two examples. And then I'd say the third thing that I really tried to do with this new book was I tried to make it more practice centric. So, the reality is that, a question that I get asked all the time is, well, how do I become a mystic, or how do I access the mystical? And if I say to somebody, you're already a mystic, and they're like, great, but I don't feel like a mystic. Right. So what do I do? And so I tried to address that with the book too, in terms of giving a little bit more content towards how do we live it? How do we manifest it in our day-to-day life?
How do we?
Do we have all night? Do we have all eternity?
Let's just say the basics, right? Because I know people already are. The way I look at it for me is going deeper. And when I say going deeper, like, we have a lot of discussions about deconstructing our essentially our religious beliefs. And I had a long conversation with one of my dear friends on here, Dr. Dorothy Parker. And, I talk about deconstructing reality, right? And then one of the statements that I really love, and it's, what do you believe and why do you believe that? And how do those beliefs add to or subtract to the quality or value of your life, right? How is this working for you? And just to question our beliefs and why do we believe that? But, for me, it's like, as I get deeper into, honestly, personal transformation in my life with the esoteric, with the occult, right? And then leaning into, like, okay, so how does Gnosticism, which for me, mystics or mysticism, and that kind of goes hand in hand. And I think honestly, it feels good. And I think if people start learning about mysticism in a way, and specifically Christian mysticism, I believe it can open up a lot of emotions and feelings related to Christianity that you might have loved in the church, when you were reading that King James and you were going for it. But then there's so much that, baggage that came along with that. And now, like, discovering, like, what this is in the fact that you can go deep and be like, wait, there's more to the to the Christ, to the Christ consciousness, as we may say, right? There's
the spirit,
there's more to it. And how do we get more? It's like, okay, maybe buy a book.
Well, I'm not going to tell you not to buy a book, especially if it's got my name on it. But there's some amazing literature out there. Yeah,
look behind you.
So But so let me throw a quote out from you. There is a gentleman named Rick Doblin, and Rick is actually involved in the psychedelic world. He's been at the forefront of trying to legalize MDMA for therapeutic, legitimate therapeutic uses. But he's Rick Doblin, Doblin. But he said, and this was quoted in the book, How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan.
Love that.
This one line, man, when I read this line, it was, he said, mysticism is the antidote to fundamentalism. Mysticism is the antidote to fundamentalism. And so what I would say, and especially since part of the menu here is deconstruction, that when you really kind of connect to that, a lot of things fall into place, including why a lot of Christians are afraid of mysticism or even hostile to mysticism. It's because they intuitively understand that if you swim in those waters, your whole worldview is going to be reconfigured. and the
Wow.
whole patriarchal control god of, hierarchy and order and dominance and submission, suddenly it makes no sense. It just, you just see it as, oh, that's just naked power dynamics. That's okay. You got Jesus with the radical message of inclusivity and egalitarianism,
Mhm.
and then you got the people that have come along and said, well, let me take this and use it to enforce Christian nationalism, or use it to enforce white supremacy, or use it to enforce the hatred of women or the hatred of queer people or whatever. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is to put this fundamentalist model out there, and that your job, what is it? Your job is to pay, pray, and obey. You're supposed to be a submissive little Christian, and you put the money in the plate, and you absolutely obey all the rules, and then you get to feel like you're better than all those other people, all those, those Muslims or Jews or Buddhists or whatever, blah, 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 blah. But that's not spiritual liberation. It's
Ooh, I like that.
it's a fundamentalism, and which is it's all in the head. It's all very cerebral. It's all legalism is dualism, and so if you're caught in a legalistic framework, you're caught in the trap of the dual. And
Ooh.
what the mystical invitation is, the spirit is like beguiling us, almost like flirting with us, and saying, come into these waters of love, come into these waters of connectivity, come into these waters of unity. And when you're swimming in these waters, then all the isms fall away. And suddenly it's like, oh my gosh, we're all one. We are all one. We are all connected. And, this is why Jesus says, love your enemies. It's because when I hate my enemy, in a very real way, I'm hating myself. I'm pumping hatred through my ecosystem. I think it was the Buddha who said, hatred is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I think that's a paraphrase, but you get the point. And so, and that's not to say we give our enemies a pass. Let me be real clear. We still fight to dismantle injustice. We still fight to dismantle privilege and prejudice and violence and all of the things that cause so much damage in our culture. But the fight is always motivated out of passionate love. It's less about cursing the dark or the evil, and it's more about embracing the radiance, the luminosity, the joy. The second fruit of the spirit, second only to love, is joy. And so that's one of the things we have to look for is, where are we being called into joy? Where are we being called into a dance? Where are we being called into kindness? So is it okay to get political here?
Yeah,
Should I
absolutely.
get political? So just
Absolutely.
last week, I went to a rally here. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, a swing state.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I went to a rally with Kamala Harris and Barack Obama, Spike Lee, Tyler Perry, Raphael Warnock, John Ossoff, Bruce Springsteen. I mean, just all these amazing people. And that rally, it's like there was no black or white in that stadium. 14, 15, 20, however many thousands of people. We were all one people. There was just this incredible sense of unity and brotherhood, sisterhood, fraternity, kindness, care. People were caring for each other and looking out for each other. And, there was no anger. There was no hostility. There was just this sense really of love. Now, we can get cynical and say, well, that was just one afternoon. But let me be real. We had all stood in line for 2 hours in the hot sun to get into that stadium. And then we had to go through a Secret Service checkpoint and all that kind of stuff. We could have all been really, really angry. But there was a higher energy at work there, a higher vibration.
Could you, as who you are and all you've been through, tell me, like, because you can go into an atmosphere like that and, levels of consciousness and what the practices and the things that we do, and experience, which puts us kind of can put us more aware or tuned in. And so I know exactly what you mean in terms of like feeling the vibe and feeling the energy and how to I'm sure you could feel that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and well, like I said, it was a love fest. Now, here's the reality for all of us is then how do we take that energy back into our day-to-day life? You know, it's and that's and it's not always easy because guess what? We're human. We have bad days. We get really annoyed with that person who's in front of us or just cut us off in traffic or whatever. And so, it's not I don't want to oversell just the happy
I
love
get it.
vibes, but I think the point behind the happy love vibes is they exist, they're real, they're possible. And then the work, the mystical work, the spiritual work, the work is how do I embed that in my life? If you want to use chakras, how do I bring it down into all 7 chakras so that I am impacting my tribe, I am impacting all my relationships, I am impacting my own power dynamics. It is showing up in my creativity, in my compassion, in my wisdom. And it's going to be messy and it's going to be imperfect because there's so much trauma and there's so much damage that we all inherited and we're stuck in this world. But to the extent that we are committed to bringing higher consciousness even into the most difficult situations, we are already living it, and we're making little changes that are investments into the future that will pay big dividends. And I think holding that as our North Star becomes a really, really important part of this process.
Do you feel the religious masculinity and the divine feminine, even though even though we have both, like every one of us have both, and we can embrace both. And this is not related to gender, right? A lot of people will see femininity related to the female gender, and a male could be feminine even though its gender is male.
Sure.
And I think there's a balance that we can actually embrace and have and become divine. But I personally can just really see a lot of the angst and anger, and I can see a lot of it is like kind of like an old paradigm, right? And then you have a new paradigm in terms of the way life has always transitioned. There is not a time that we can say that in even our country in history that we haven't had major transitions in terms of who had the view of power. Okay, this is what power looks like, right? It looks like this. I mean,
yeah.
And so just to be in that space and in that room to see these individual people, and now we're having these conversations about, who's going to run the country. For me personally, you know, I say regardless what happens, I still know that in time, a presidential candidate's only 4 years. Like it happened, but I mean, come on, like it's just really amazing to see and to feel and to tune in, and how that relates to spirituality, consciousness, because I'm beginning to kind of separate the religion, spirituality, and consciousness, kind of separating those things, because I think consciousness is just consciousness, right? And
it's universal. Yeah,
it's universal, and so because spirituality can be religious, but just to see and feel the trajectory of how things are changing, and then how, like, I didn't know anything about Rosicrucianism or Rosicrucians. I didn't know anything, really in depth of Gnosticism, and then, Sunni. And our last guest last week was talking about Rumi. And it's kind of like we have so much information and so much access that this thing, this thing is literally about to implode with something. And I think it's honestly, I feel good, even though it's like you see the chaos.
Well, and let me just say one more thing
Yeah,
about politics. And again, I
go
don't want to
for it.
dwell too much on that, but I think the reality is we're recording this just a few days before the election day, and it is a momentous election day, and it will make a difference who moves into
Yeah,
the White House.
absolutely.
But the I think that it's so important to remember that no matter who wins on, who gets inaugurated on January 20th, that our work of working for justice and working to make our society a better place and to, eliminate violence and to
Yes.
eliminate prejudice and privilege, that work does not change.
No.
Yeah, maybe we have a little bit more wind behind our back because we have a friendlier government. I'm all for that. And I think we should all pray for that and work for that and vote accordingly. But, I think the reality is that there have been, you know, people in
Go for it.
power who have not been our friends. That this would not be the first time. And so it's just so important to keep doing what's the old saying, think globally, act locally. And that I think that
Absolutely.
it's so that's the only thing I would say. We've all I'm assuming we've all done the best we can. We voted our conscience, we've talked with our friends, we've donated it when we could, knocked on doors, wrote postcards, done all the things we've done, and now it's in spirit's hands, and
Absolutely.
then recognizing that there are such big energies, but there's always hope, and there's always the potential to make a difference. I want to circle back to male and female because
Go
you brought that
for
up.
it.
You
Go
brought that
for
up.
it. Absolutely.
So and I noticed I've been kind of keeping my eye on the chat, and I've been
Go for
noted. Let's see, what did Dr. Dorothy write? She wrote, masculine and feminine energy is in each of us. We are not whole unless we begin to marry those energies in ourselves. Amen. Amen. Absolutely. And the thing that I would say is, if you want to talk about mysticism in the Christian tradition, I'd say the Jewish and the Christian tradition, is that the number one book in the Bible that the mystics quote throughout history is the Song of Solomon, the Song of Songs. And this is because for a couple of levels. One is that the mystics have understood that mysticism is ultimately about love, and the Song of Songs is a love poem. More than anything else, it is a love poem. So understanding that love is at the heart of mysticism, but then also understanding that, and it is written in a heterosexual context. Hey, the reality is most people are heterosexual. That's the paradigm. The love between the man and the woman, the bride and the groom, then becomes emblematic of the love between spirit and humanity, between God and creation, between the divine and the earthly. And so we are all participating in this cosmic love affair. But then to take it to even the next level of interpretation is that every one of us has the bride and the groom within us. Every one of us. I don't care what your gender or gender identity is, male, female, trans, non-binary, gender diverse, wherever you are on the spectrum. And I do believe gender is a spectrum. Wherever you are on the spectrum, we all have the yin and the yang kind of
Mm.
emerging within us. And part of the mystical journey is this journey of kind of befriending and embracing and loving the full spectrum
Yes.
within us. And so,
Mm.
and one of the things that, just again, a personal story, I am very much kind of a feminine male. I've been that way since childhood, and I was bullied for it. I mean, kids
Mm.
picked on me. And for years it was like, well, what's wrong with me? And of course I tried to tough it up. And then the deeper, yeah, really, like I could do that. But the deeper I got into mysticism, the more I realized this is how the spirit created me. This is who I am. And that it actually, for me, it was kind of a bonus, since I could see that the call was that sacred marriage, that inner sacred
Mm.
marriage. And that's not to say, I mean, if you are hard masculine or hard feminine, that doesn't mean, because you've still got the yin and the yang in you.
Yeah.
It's just your sacred marriage might look a little different from mine. And that's fine. Again, every mystic is a special kind of person. But I do believe no matter where you are on the spectrum, that is part of the work, the interior work of that sacred marriage. But then how does that manifest on an exterior level? Well, number one, learning to love everybody, regardless of their gender identity, regardless of their gender politics, which means we have to do a lot of deconstruction of patriarchy in our culture. And I mean, we think about privilege, well, one of the big privileges is male privilege. Yeah. And so it's like, all right. And for those of us who are male or sign male or whatever, how do we step out of that? How do we find that path to treating our sisters with absolute respect and dignity and kindness and compassion and justice? So that becomes a really core practice. And for women, and again, I can't speak for women, and I certainly can't speak for all women, but I know that, especially my age, many women were given messages about, you stand by your man, your job is to take good care of your man, blah, 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 surrender your desires to take care of him. Yes. That has to be deconstructed. Women need to step into their power because, number one, they hold up half the sky. And powerful women make for a stronger society. Number two, I'm married to a powerful woman, and I can tell you, it makes for a sexy marriage. So I mean, if you have a man who is fully in his power and a woman who's fully in her power, that's dynamite. When they freely and consensually choose to be lovers, or whatever the combination may be, but the partners both have to be in their power in order to reach that. And so this is, I think, again, just one more example of the wisdom of the mystics and how it can have real world implications into us, stepping into a more fair and a more just and a more balanced life, but also a juicier life, a more joyful life. Dare I say it, a sexier life. So
yes, I love it. Well, I think not embracing, but looking at what we call this is for a man and this is for a woman. I mean, things are beginning to merge. And I think there's a lot of fear. And fear is what drives a lot.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And it's more of not fear of what people are becoming, but it's really the fear of the unknown. And the fear of if a woman, for instance, is in power. And then there's a whole nother dynamic if a Black woman is in power or anything that resembles a Black woman being in power. There's a whole nother dichotomy, if you will, or deconstructing that a person would have to do in what they feel. And even for those people to raise up into their own power with the understanding that you don't have to be a masculine feminine in order to actually do this particular thing. You don't have to it's like be you and embrace you. And I mean, if we can understand what it means to move in frequency, right? Our energy, understand our energy, come into our energy. That's the whole goal of anything to do with deconstructing. Like, you don't need to deconstruct because it's a thing to do and because you were hurt. I know there's things you may experience, and I think you're probably going to naturally probably go through something, read some books and things of that nature. But I think the exciting part about all of it is just being able to say, you know what, as you talked about spiritual liberation, I talk about spiritual independence, right? Another term is spiritual autonomy, spiritually fluid. Like, I can go and I can see this, and I can go and I can see this, and how people may respond or react. And I think it makes for a better world, no matter what. Like, no matter what. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
But real quick, the direction of where we're going in this plan, in the direction in the way the planet is going, people may end up losing lives, and we may end up having different things go on. But it's clear, if you look at history in the past, we no longer literally hang people on the streets to show everybody else, look at what's happening. Well, we have some things that we do that are reminiscent of it, right? This could be linked in terms of, like, when you see this happen, that's considered almost like a hanging. But
Yeah.
between social media, between now we got the infinite intelligence of us coming into a computer and us being able to use all knowledge, and they calling it AI, right? But
Mhm,
now
mhm,
we have access where I can be like, what did you say?
mhm.
I'm going to look it up on my phone and I get to question what you have to say. Right. And so what's going to happen as the generations keep changing? Like, I'm sorry, I tell some of my hardcore friends, especially if they hardcore ultra beyond Tea Party conservative, I say, like, you might want to think about leaving the planet.
Hey, I'm an idealist. I pray that Trump's heart will be converted. And I know people are like, that's a pipe dream, but I'm like, I
It's
believe in miracles. I believe in miracles.
I
So.
listened to a guy say the other night, like,
Mhm.
if you're going to take office, you might need to they need to do some DMT. And then you say,
Bring on the bufo, man.
it's like they wake up like, oh my God, what happened to Trump? And he's like, oh, we need to just love. We need to love.
Yeah. Open the borders, man.
Like, oh, I don't care about the borders no more. Can you imagine that would, like, I think everybody would be like, no, I want to be mad at you.
I have a friend who was a peace activist in Northern Ireland.
Mm.
And it was so wonderful getting to know him because he had an insider's glimpse. And he's living in North America now, but he was there during the Troubles. I mean, when literally people had to walk to work different ways every day to avoid being assassinated. I mean, it was
Wow.
just intense, and going through a metal detector to walk into the drugstore. I mean, that's what it
Wow.
was like in Ireland during the Troubles. And so all of this is going on, and everybody knows they're in a mess, and how do we get out of it? And nobody knows how to get out of it. And there was a Catholic priest at a monastery just west of Belfast who reached out to the Protestant leaders. And he said, we have got to be talking. We have got to have a conversation. We have got to, this can't go on. This can't go on. We're all going to be dead. But here's the thing is that for the first, I don't know how many years it was, but it was a couple of years, the Protestants would come to that monastery at night under darkness. And the Catholic priests would receive them under darkness, because if word got out, they would be targeted by their own people.
Oh, wow.
They would be targeted by their own people. And so this is the thing that I think we have to remember is that, like Trumpism is a whole lot bigger than Donald Trump or J.D. Vance, or Steve Bannon or those people. They're the ones that at the top, and they're the figureheads and they're the mouthpieces. But if they suddenly had a conversion of heart, their lives would be in danger. That's the thing. And that's the thing we have to keep in mind, that's a systemic
Wow.
injustice that has to be healed from the ground up. And so this is what we're facing right now is the
Okay.
systemic nature of these problems that we're facing.
All right. Okay. So I hope you're ready for this.
Bring it on.
I believe the basis and the root of all this lies within our belief. And Christian nationalism, if it was not what it is today, that is the foundation in which has been used in order to captivate people's minds, almost like a deep rooted programming, because I do things, and the things that I do help you see. And it's like computers are us externally, and we want to be the computer, right? It's like it's just us externally. AI is just us externally.
Yeah.
You know, the infinite intelligence is what I consider more of God than anything, right? And that is something that we yearn for, pull to. But the basis of, as we evolve in our belief systems and deity, and as we evolve, like, it's okay, you can believe what you want, you can believe what you want. To a degree, you can believe what you want, but those beliefs can affect you, and it can affect other people outside, and this can carry on for centuries.
So here's an example from technology. And I hope people can just use your imagination to see how this can be applied in other contexts. Solar power, nuclear power. Solar power, nuclear power. You want, we all, it's electricity that's connecting us all together. We all want power. Solar power. What does solar power do? Everybody puts panels on their roof. I mean, and if we had a just society, they would be affordable, they would be accessible. Every new house would have them. It's decentralized, decentered. It's democratic. Not a whole lot of money in that. Compare that to nuclear power, where you've got a radioactive substance that terrorists can use to cause great harm. We saw in World War II, takes out entire cities. So if you're going to do nuclear power, you need a police state. You need security. You need a whole security infrastructure. You need some sort of centralized authority to control that and to control the access to it. So nuclear power actually builds a more centralized totalitarian culture. It is built into it. Solar power actually is more democratic and leads to a decentralized culture. And so I offer that to say that even our belief systems, we have to interrogate them. Do these beliefs, do they lead us towards shared power or centralized power? And these are the questions we have to be asking of our beliefs. Because if we are putting our energy into centralizing beliefs, we are creating a hell for our children and our grandchildren.
You know, this was a great show. If anything happens to us, just know we
If we're missing tomorrow, they've come for us in the middle of the night. Huh?
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's also um I think the cool thing, the neat thing about, as we quote deconstruct, it's not necessarily about those things. I think that we are kind of contemplating and looking at and going through and questioning. The only reason why we're doing that is so that we can arrive to the point where we can understand what power do we have, right? And then how do we use that power to how do we use that power to be who we are authentically, right?
Authentically, honestly.
You know, and
And
do things related to that consciously.
and most people, I don't care the color of your skin, your religion, even your economic background, blah, blah, blah. Most people want enough power to live well, to take care of their families, to prepare for their retirement, to, when their transition comes, to leave a little bit for the kids. That's what most people want. And it's unfortunate that we have a small percentage of people who are carrying their own trauma, who believe, I have to have a bigger slice of the pie, even though it means everybody else has to do with a little bit less. And this is the challenge. This is the heart of capitalism. It's the challenge. It is a spiritual problem that we have all got to be mindful of, and mindful of in ourselves, but also, again, in terms of what are the choices we make about money, what are the choices we make about, our career choices, the way we counsel our children. that, knowing that there is enough, there's not enough for everybody to be wealthy, rich wealthy, but there's enough for everybody to be heart wealthy. And that's what we've got to orient ourselves. There's a fella, I think he lives up in North Carolina, named Charles Eisenstein. And he has this wonderful message, and he says, what if we stopped measuring wealth by how many dollars are in the bank, and we began measuring wealth by how much we give away? And that the truly wealthy people are the truly generous people. And then I would go even so far as to say the percentage of what we give away, because sometimes people that barely have 2 dimes to rub together are the most generous people on the planet. And so, what if we saw those people? Those are our heroes. Those are the people that we want on the covers of our magazines, that we want to see on the talk shows and in YouTube and on TikTok. Wouldn't that just change everything? But that requires that change of consciousness,
Yeah.
So.
Wow. It does require, man, it's such a different, that shift even in my own self, where I'm like, when you flip on the news today and everybody talks about the things that we really want to see, we act like we don't want to see them. But we are wired, maybe the system has done it, but we are wired to want to see certain things. We're wired to, as you look at wealth in the world and what does that do and how does that make people act towards you? I mean, heck, religion in itself wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for the fact that it's really powerful based on the numbers and the money, and then how they use that money to almost like get more people. Like the goal,
to protect the institution,
Oh,
and this is, we see it again and again, and it's not just a Christian problem, it's not just a Catholic problem.
no.
It shows up again and again and again. And this is the dilemma, because why do we create institutions? We want community structures to pass on the teachings, to pass on the wisdom, to support people. I mean, churches can do a lot of good. They're not monolithically bad by any stretch. But those of us who have been burned by churches, sometimes it's hard to see that, because we've seen the shadow side, and we've seen how the church will protect itself and throw people under the bus, in a heartbeat. And so it's this incredible dance of how do we affirm and magnify all that is good, all that is about compassion and about sharing and about kindness and about lifting everybody up, while we, relentlessly keep kind of deconstructing, dismantling those systems when they begin to be self-protective and then actually cause harm. And it's I mean, I think the beginnings of those institutionalized problems are always so subtle. And so it's, this is, again, back to mindfulness, why we have to be in the practice of tending to our own interior silence, because that trains us to be more attentive. And one of the things we have to learn to be attentive of is the little things that can lead to to big problems down the road. Yeah, so
Beautiful. Real quick, it's giving that it's October 31st, it's Halloween, and there's so much like that's wrapped up in there's so much wrapped up in this particular holiday. I think it's a holiday that we spend like some of the most money on the decorations, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah.
But you've done some work within understanding. There was a book you had that, of course, you had some Celtic wisdom, and I think some people see can see things to do with as far as paganism.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot. I go to a store and a lot of people move from their fundamentalists, and then they leave their family or get away from it, and they instantly go to the Wiccan section. Like they just completely do a 360.
Bring on the magic, huh?
Yeah, bring on the magic and bring on the crystals, and it's interesting for me whenever it's like you see the metaphysical store, and there's hardly ever any teachings that's similar to this. You know, a lot of it is straight going to that. But one of the questions I have is like, what is the, to sum it up, it's kind of like this idiot's guide to paganism in terms of like when we look at Christian mysticism, but then if we look, because a lot of people will link mystic and mysticism, even though it's Christian in front of them, they'll link that and think, oh, that's New Age, and then they'll think paganism, and then they'll think Wiccan, and then they'll think all the other things that they have been told. And so what do you say to that in terms of like if a person is thinking like paganism is mysticism?
Yeah, and both are bad. So, well, first of all, let me just be clear. I write out of my own experience and my own ancestry. So, my ancestry on my father's side is Scottish, and then Scotland is one of the Celtic lands. So naturally, I'm very much, Celtic is in my blood. But I could have just as easily written about Dios de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead, out of the Mexican tradition, or indigenous African spiritualities with their veneration of the ancestors, or Shinto from Japan with the veneration of the ancestors. This is global. Pagan spirituality is simply indigenous spirituality. It is the spirituality of the people, of the earth, of the land. And so when we talk about Wicca or the Druids, or, that's out of the European tradition. But it's like, so you got the European indigenous, and then you've got the African indigenous, and then you've got the Native American indigenous, the Australian indigenous. There are indigenous spiritualities everywhere. And if you sit and you start to look under the hood of those spiritualities, you begin to see lots of connections. That there's so many kind of universal energies at dynamic. So October 31st, Halloween, All Hallows Eve. In the Catholic world, tomorrow is All Saints Day. So this is the hallowed evening, the night, it's kind of like was the night before Christmas, the night before All Saints Day became Halloween. So it actually has this connection, this very Christian connection. But what a lot of people don't realize is that All Saints is actually part one of a two-part story. November 1st, the Catholic Church recognizes all the saints, but then November 2nd is All Souls Day, where they basically say, okay, now we're going to honor all of our ancestors, not just the ones that got the seal of approval. They all get honored. So even in the Catholic world, this is a time of ancestor honoring. And so it is just all over the world, you have these traditions where there is this recognition that our ancestors who have gone on, they've made their transition, they've gone to their next assignment, is what I like to say, but that they watch over us and they still love us. They still care for us. They are in a higher dimension, a higher level of consciousness. And out of that heightened level of consciousness, they care about us. They are our guardian angels. And so it's like every indigenous tradition all around the world has needed some way to honor that. And when you look at Celtic spirituality or you look at Dios de los Muertos, you have that kind of tied in with this time of year. And so, and I think, again, countries where Christianity became the dominant religion, the ancestor veneration may have been a year-round thing, but then it kind of got married to November 1st because of the Catholic influence. November 1st is when the Catholics do their ancestor honoring. So we'll bring the pagan traditions in as well. So all the things we think about Halloween, the jack-o'-lanterns, the kids dressing up like ghosts and goblins and all that kind of stuff, all of that is vestigial remains of ancient indigenous practices, when it was believed that this was the time of year when the veil that separates the earthly life from heavenly life or eternal life, that veil becomes thin. And so it becomes a time when we are more susceptible to receiving the guidance, the spirits, the wisdom from our beloved who are across the veil. And that's really the heart of it. And it just blows my mind, and you see, first of all, capitalism got its grubby little hands on it. And so what is it now? It's about candy. And it's about bags of chocolate that you buy at the grocery. And listen, I have a sweet tooth just like anybody else. I love me my Snickers bar. So I'm not saying this to be super judgmental.
No.
But what I am trying to point out is that it is a diminishment. Just like if Christmas is only about the presents and the stockings, that's a diminishment. Christmas is about the winter solstice, and it's about the birth of the light, the birth of the sun/son. That's the message of Christmas. And what have we done? We've turned it into a big feeding frenzy where on Black Friday, we all go and stand in line for 3 hours to get into Walmart to buy our 69-inch TV for $800 instead of the normal 2,000. Welcome to capitalism, And listen, I've stood in those lines too. So no judgment, no shame, but that's the system we have created. But then the next level, and we've all seen this with our evangelical brothers and sisters, or maybe we've participated in it ourselves, is the trunk or treat kind of a thing. And that is, if you think about trunk or treat, it's like this idea that Halloween is demonic or is evil.
Yes. Yeah.
And so instead of dressing up like ghosts and goblins, you have to dress up like Bible characters,
Yes.
So you dress up like Mary and Joseph, or or
where did that come from? Do you know? Like, is there something in the church that actually was
I'm sure it's middle class white people. Come on, it's just middle class white people who are afraid of the dark. All puns intended. All puns intended. And so that's where it comes from. And again, I don't mean to be negative here. And
no, you're not.
But it shows how what was originally a sacred time for honoring our loved ones got demeaned and debased, first by capitalism and then by fundamentalism. And so
I think we're dealing with that. I only think we're dealing with that more so a lot now is because the veil is thin in general when it comes to whether it be the ancestors and us doing stuff like we're doing tonight. Like we're able to broadcast this and we're able to have 30, 40 people throughout the world that are hungry, and a lot of us them know certain parts, but this is like feeding their soul and open them up and allowing them to explore and do that contemplative thing that you talk about, which I love. And I live in contemplation and being able to ask questions, but then being able to be okay with not having answers and yet working on ourselves, right? Daily, right? And it's not within one thing, it's not within like one methodology or, I listened to a guy today and he was talking about yoga and, all the disciplines, your breath work, which I like, and then your plant-based medicines. And then you have all these different things. And it's like, if I do this thing, if I do my ayahuasca experience, and then it's like, oh, it opens it up. And it's like all these things and how we integrate these things and practices in our lives, but it's still, it's amazing what that's being able to go silent, being able to like be with yourself, and allowing that consciousness, right, to be with you and, between your body and your ego's telling you to do something. And yet though you still have something in you as you practice it telling you to be still.
Yeah. Be
I,
still and know. Be still and know. It's so, so essential.
you
And
have, go ahead.
think about how our culture has become so frenzied and so loud. And listen, I love music. I love dancing. I love a good party. The rally I went to last week was a big, beautiful party. So I'm not saying that's bad, but we're a little out of balance in our
Yes.
culture where it's too much noise all the time,
Yes.
and we're not finding that time. I mean, if you think about indigenous cultures, like Native American indigenous cultures, when women would be on their monthly cycle, they would go into the moon lodge, and it's like
Wow.
moving away from the noise and going within while the body is doing its work to honor the cycles of the mysteries of life. And I think, for men, maybe the corollary would be when they would go on the hunt, or go on the vision quest or those kinds of things. But it's like it was baked into traditional cultures that you had to have those times of silence and of retreat and of pulling back so that you could listen to the magnificence deep within you. And we've lost that. And so this is one of the things that I hope all of us can be thinking about is
Yes.
how can I restore at least some of that in my life
Yes.
so that because the wisdom is in there. The wisdom is in there. It is just waiting to speak to us. And listen, every one of us can make mistakes. All right. I know sometimes your ego gets in the way and you're like, oh, I'm getting a call to leave my wife and to run off somewhere and to marry somebody that's only, 19 years old. All right. That's probably your ego talking. That's where we need community, that we can support one another, occasionally call each other when we've gotten a little off track. But we recognize that underneath that ego, there is real wisdom, and that real wisdom is available to us. And it's that real wisdom that literally will save the world. But it's going to call us to do some difficult things because we've got to fight injustice. We've got to deconstruct the systems of power and privilege in our society. And those of us who are getting called to do it are generally the ones that don't have a lot of resources. But you
Yeah.
know what? Read scripture, read history. Revolution has always come from the bottom. When it comes from the top, that's when people get killed. That's when you have genocide and pogroms and awful things like that. But when revolution comes from the bottom, that's when there's liberation.
There's a consciousness, and I believe the consciousness in us, no matter what, outside of us, it's changing, but I also feel that it's changed because there's no space, no time. When we start getting into the quantum realm and quantum, it's kind of like those things are done. Now we just moving ourselves in this time right into that space. And I think sometime when we begin to see it, even though we're working on it, like I begin to see, I have a reverence of hope, not just hope, but I can feel how it's weird because I feel like I can feel the ancestors in myself on how, like, with this election in this time, I feel like, man, I'm so far deep into the future, and it's weird, like to be able to see and witness like what we're witnessing. Like you got this system over here that's been established for a long time, and then you have this system that's been established, but it's evolving big time. And like uh this one wants to go back, and we need the Bible, and we need this, and we need, and it's really the systems that they that we really want. But no matter what, I promise you, it's changing, and you have no choice. Before we go, there was one last thing I just had to, because I know you've done some search on it, and it feels good when I hear you talk about it. And that is like, I come from the American African, but people say African American, but they I come from that space, Church of God in Christ, and I think it was essentially them developed this shout and this dance and this movement, and they just integrated Christianity with it, right? Because they pretty much had to. Some people say that the Africans were Christian before they got here, and I could say they might have had some level of a version of it. Eastern Christianity could have been around before Catholicism. I mean, but but for the most part, we were integrated with their practices. And so I still see some roots, African roots, the shout and the dance and the movement and all that we do. And so you mentioned um, African. Have you done any search or any connection to, African spiritualism or within because you had mentioned like the pagan, just like pagans, and it's just kind of a combination.
Not enough. Not enough. But there are some wonderful threads to follow there.
Is it?
I'm thinking about, and again, I live in the Southeast. I live in Atlanta. But if you
Yeah.
go to the low country of South Carolina, you have the Gullah people. And the
Okay.
Gullah people, again, were, I think there's, kind of an integration of enslaved Africans connecting with indigenous people and creating their own culture. And certainly there would be a Christian dimension there, but also a lot of, vestigial indigenous practices that inform their spirituality. Think of the Voodoo or the Santeria traditions, the culture in New Orleans, the culture in pockets of Appalachia. The reality is that the wisdom is there. And I really love what you're saying about the links between, even so much of when you think of the rhythms of Pentecostalism, and Azusa Street, again, this place where black and white just came together,
Yeah.
and there was this union. But that, the rhythm of the dancing and of the demonstrative expression, I think very much comes out of indigenous African traditions. I think there's a lot there that needs to be done. There's a man here in Atlanta named Thee Smith, and he's an Episcopal priest, and he wrote a book called Conjuring Culture, which I think gets into some of that. Thee's African American, and again, looking at kind of traditional culture from maybe the slave era and more recently, and how the African experience shaped the Christian experience in America for people of color. So I'm again, being raised in white, racist white America, I mean, for me, Howard Thurman was a revelation, but and it's, and that's one of the things I love, to walk in a room full of white people and introduce them to Howard Thurman. So, baby steps, man, so baby steps. But it's
I mean, there was so much that was buried too. I mean, heck, I've been doing a study on the divine science and there's the divine churches, and how the there was black people that were picking up on the Theosophy Society and elements of consciousness and all those things. Rosicrucian, they were picking that up in the 60s, right? And they had churches that was spreading. And a lot of those things it's not that they got shut down, but of course, the church was really, over the years, it has been really hardcore at pushing people away from anything outside of what they believe, right? But I think it's a time now that it's time to not necessarily just bring those things back, but to bring back an element of community, an element of understanding and knowledge, and that way we can share this, right? And that's what this is, honestly. This forum, if you will, or it's on my page, but essentially kind of leading the charge in us being able to discover ourselves, discover more about who we are. And that's the whole, the channel being called Expanded Consciousness, going beyond belief.
And you mentioned 40 people, and I think, let us never lose sight of the fact that Jesus and 12 others changed.
Yeah.
It's not about the numbers, it's about the depth of the love.
Yes.
If the love is deep, the miracles will flow. And I think that's what we all have to keep in mind.
Yes, absolutely. I've always been a person that get a small group that help elevate and raise consciousness, be on kind of one accord and feeling the love. And I just know that it's just, that's it. I mean, just that alone, right, is a lot, even outside of even thinking about the potential. But I know for a fact that people are leaving and looking for themselves. And I have a lot that I'm working on where people talk about religion versus spirituality, and and all these different things. And I've grown a lot where it's like, some things just is, and it really comes down to understanding belief, right? And you may have to deconstruct actually your whole entire reality.
Yeah. Yay. And that's what we're here doing. You're right. This is one corner of a movement that's a whole lot bigger than us. And so, back to one of my favorite drums to beat, man, joy.
Joy, joy, joy.
Do not thwart joy, cultivate joy, give free rein to joy. I mean, yes, and so many of us have trauma that we have to deal with, intergenerational trauma, PTSD, those kinds of things. But I also know that miracles come, the grass grows through the cracks in the sidewalk. Miracles come in the most desolate places. So no matter how broken your life might be, or your family's life, or your tribe's life might be, the joy is available, and it comes from within. So
Absolutely.
I know we're out of time. We could do this all night, but thank you so much. What a great conversation.
Yes,
And
it was beautiful.
it's been so beautiful watching the chat. Thank you all so much for your lovely words. Several people have really, mentioning Coptic Christianity. I mean, that was another thought I had, was that the Coptic, that's another thread to explore, where Christianity moved into Egypt. And I think that we have not even begun to really look at how that influenced the African community, 1600 years ago. And so, there's a lot there for us to excavate. But hey,
Hey, I see Brother John Lewis. Yes, I know. And he says it goes back long before 60s. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Well, and whenever I think about the AME church in itself, but I know there's other things that are within the African American community that we add in terms of when it comes to just what people see today. It's there was a lot more going on outside of evangelical and Pentecostalism. And so I think it's beautiful. Thank everyone for being here. I'm going through these comments real quick just to double check. There's no questions that anyone had. If so, we'll have to do it again. Maybe you come back next year or so if you would like.
Hey, I had so much fun tonight. Let's just get it on the calendar. Absolutely.
Oh, we got to get it on the calendar, brother, because it's a joy, and I appreciate all the work. You guys, go to my Facebook page. You can, there's a link there, or you can go straight to Amazon. Do you have your website? I remember your website. Make sure let's post your website real quick.
Yeah, it's just Anam Cara. That's AN as in Nancy, AM as in Mary, CHARA.com. Anam Cara. It's a Gaelic word, so out of the Celtic tradition, and it just means soul friend.
Yeah, I know I had it booked on here. What I'll do is I'll make sure I post it in the chat, and plus I can actually post it here so you guys know. Hey, can you give us a few last words, kind of a meditation?
Sure. So I would just invite everybody, as you are willing and able, to just put your hands over your heart. Just take a breath or two. Just be in this moment. There's no rush, no hurry. Spirit is present. You are so deeply loved. And I just invite you to trust and to know that within every heartbeat and in the silence between every heartbeat, that infinite well of love is available to you. And it will guide you and teach you and transform you and call you to be a beacon of light and to make a difference in this world. You don't have to go to seminary. You don't have to be ordained. You don't have to get a certificate or go to an expensive workshop. You just need to listen. Listen and trust and be in community and communion with other like-minded souls. And miracles will happen. Amen.
Thank you so much. It was beautiful. Thank you so much. I enjoy myself so much with you, brother. I love the internet.
It's so good. It's so good. Yeah. And thank you all. Thank you all who were here and your comments. And hey, maybe we'll connect at some point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, guys, until next time, we'll see you next week. I'll be right here. Bye-bye.